when the man I trusted more than my own blood looked me in the eye and said, "You were never meant to know the truth." Cassia, something inside me broke in a way I've never been able to fix. That was the night he walked away, leaving me with a secret that wasn't supposed to survive. I didn't realize then that his betrayal would follow me for years, or that it would return one day with a gun pressed to my head, forcing me to show them why you never threaten someone like me. The morning carried that thin, early autumn chill that always slipped through the window frames. No matter how many times I sealed them, I tried to settle into the calm rhythm I'd built for myself, focusing on the report I needed to finish. But the soft blinking on my router kept stealing my attention. It wasn't the normal flicker of someone streaming a movie down the block. It pulsed in a pattern offbeat, uneven, almost hesitant. I accessed the internal protocol out of habit, expecting a harmless signal drift, but what flashed back at me wasn't any sequence used by OrionNet. It wasn't anything their equipment should have been generating at all. I stared at it longer than I should have, long enough for a sense of familiarity to tug uncomfortably at the back of my mind. The tempo of the code, the way it looped and curled, it echoed something I once wrote in a very different life. I forced myself to break the stare, to remember that this was Boulder, not the places I used to work in, and that sometimes a glitch was just a glitch. I shut the laptop before my thoughts wandered too far and headed out for my morning run, clinging to routine like it was still enough to steady me. But halfway down the next block, the same gray RV I'd noticed the past 2 days sat parked under the same elm tree, as if it had never moved. The windows were dark, swallowing the morning light instead of reflecting it. Then a faint click snapped overhead, a tiny metallic note slicing through the quiet. I didn't need to look up to know the sound. A drone was watching. Cold threaded down my spine as I finished the loop back home. Whatever peace I thought I'd built here wasn't peace at all. It was only the thin shell of safety right before it breaks. The doorbell rang 3 times that afternoon, clean, evenly spaced taps that didn't sound like someone hoping I'd answer, but someone signaling that I should. I wiped my hands, expecting nothing more dramatic than a service reminder, and opened the door. 3 men stood on my porch wearing OrionNet uniforms that looked right at first glance and wrong at the second. The man on the left stepped forward with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed his line more than he'd ever repaired a router. He claimed they were checking a neighborhood signal issue, but his eyes never once drifted from my right hand. He watched every micro-movement as if waiting for a cue. I crouched to retie a perfectly fine shoelace, angling myself for a clearer look. The logo on their shirts was a shade off. The badges lacked the reflective strip used on all official field IDs, and under one man's vest, the hard outline of tactical armor flashed like a warning flare. My pulse slowed into that familiar, controlled rhythm, reserved for moments when danger hasn't exploded yet, but will. I rose and asked what branch office they'd come from. Silence met me. No exchanged glances. No nervous shifting. Just a sudden stillness, the kind you feel before a storm breaks. The man in the middle moved first, his fingers grazing the concealed bulge at his waist. A suppressed handgun tucked too poorly for someone who should have known better. I didn't wait for confirmation. I pivoted into him, seized his wrist, and torqued it until the gun pointed nowhere useful. My elbow drove into his throat, folding him backward with a grunt. The second man barely cleared his holster before I ripped the space heater from my entry table and hurled it across his face, sending him crashing into the wall. The third bolted toward the yard, raising a drone to catch footage, but I caught him with a kick to the shoulder that spun him into the railing. I jumped the porch rail and hit the grass running. Behind me, as I cut across the neighbor's yard, a voice hissed low, sharp, meant only for the team. "Don't ruin her hands. We still need her." Cold shot through me, sharper than any autumn wind. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know what they wanted, but they knew me well enough to plan for me. And that changed everything. I headed north, hoping distance alone could shake off whoever was tracking me, but not 10 miles past Fort Collins. A black pickup veered into my lane with surgical precision. Its tires screeched as it cut sharply across my bumper, then executed a near-perfect pit maneuver, forcing me toward the shoulder. Dust exploded around us. The truck skidded sideways, blocking the entire road. 2 men climbed out. One carried a stun gun. The other wore thick black gloves, the kind used in extraction missions. Not street fights. Black gloves meant only one thing: they wanted me alive. I locked my doors, already weighing whether ramming them was worth the risk. When headlights flared behind me, a beat-up Jeep barreled forward and slammed into the pickup's flank hard enough to knock it off alignment. It screeched across the pavement while the Jeep drifted to a stop in front of me. A man jumped out wearing a heavy jacket, moving with the unmistakable urgency of someone trained to run into gunfire instead of away from it. His stride, his posture, the way he scanned the threat without hesitation. Everything about him screamed combat rescue. A PJ, Air Force Special Operations. He yanked open my door and shouted for me to move. Instinct beat logic. I jumped into the Jeep as he floored the gas. The pickup tried to recover, fishtailing behind us, but he outmaneuvered them with frightening ease, weaving through traffic until the road behind us finally cleared. Only then did he breathe out, tension draining from his shoulders. He kept his eyes on the mirror as he said he'd expected someone to come after me, just not this openly, not this aggressively. I studied him, pulse still hammering. I asked who he was. His jaw tightened before he answered. He told me he was the only one who understood why they wanted me alive. A chill rolled down my back. This wasn't an assault. It wasn't intimidation. It was a hunt, and I wasn't just a target. I was the objective. Jordan led us deep into the Bitterroot Mountains, to a forgotten military supply outpost buried under snow and silence. Operators called places like this the pause between storms, and stepping inside felt like crossing a threshold I'd hoped never to face again. Metal groaned in the cold, wind knifed through every seam of my clothing, and the steel doors Jordan locked behind us sounded too much like a bunker sealing shut. He didn't waste time. He pulled up a federal alert, telling me large-scale signal breaches were under investigation and that my name had appeared on a target list. The words hit harder than the wind outside, leaving a tightness in my chest I couldn't swallow down. I opened the data copied from my compromised network. Lines of code streamed past, and then I saw it 3 staggered dots embedded in a routing command. It was a signature no one else used. My signature, one I'd created for missions sealed so deep they didn't exist on paper. Scrolling further only made the dread grow heavier. The navigation pattern beneath it matched a structure I'd built 8 years ago. It took a full breath for the truth to settle. The algorithm I once created had been pulled from the black vault. Jordan watched my reaction shift. He didn't have to ask what I recognized. I told him only one person ever had clearance to touch that archive, and it wasn't either of us. He moved to another monitor and pulled up incident reports. Every OrionNet engineer tied to my old project had died in so-called accidents. Cars, falls, electrical failures, a pattern hiding in plain sight. My pulse thudded painfully as the weight of it hit. This wasn't about me alone. They were erasing everyone connected to that algorithm. Then another alert lit the screen. Triad Nova had activated a new surveillance node. A sweeping signal scan was tightening over Montana. We'd be found soon. The past tugged at me like a cold hand. A mission I'd buried. A name I had never wanted to hear again. And suddenly, it fit. The only person capable of extracting that algorithm was my former SEAL commander. The realization twisted deep in my gut. I couldn't act on emotion. Not yet. I pulled up the map of signal nodes and told Jordan we needed to strike first. He hesitated only a moment before nodding. The real fight had begun. We slipped out at 3:18 a.m., the mountain air sharp enough to burn in my lungs. Jordan drove in silence, calculating risks the way only someone trained for worst-case scenarios could. I studied the decoded map, a hidden relay station disguised in a cluster of shipping containers near a cross-border line, exactly where a covert routing node would hide. We reached it at first light. No guards. No movement. A camera rotated too slowly to be real security. A silent alarm trap. I breached the lock and stepped inside. The air smelled of ozone, high-output servers running hard. I opened a terminal and dug into their system. What came up froze me. A profile dossier. My face, my biometrics, tactical notes, and above it all, priority target live capture, required for system completion. Behind me, Jordan forced open a filing cabinet. Inside were folders 6 OrionNet engineers I'd once worked with, photos of staged accidents. Each file stamped resolved. The metal room felt smaller with every breath. The fourth twist hit hard. Triad Nova wasn't just hunting me. They were building a nationwide signal control network, and my stolen algorithm was the missing key. A sharp ping cut through the container. Satellite response. We'd been detected. I ripped the drive out, jammed it into my jacket, and triggered the system's destruction. Machinery groaned as it overheated. We bolted outside just as the container shuddered. A sweeping satellite beam slid across the snow like a pale spotlight. Jordan cursed Montana was no longer safe. I looked back at the burning metal and felt the heat rise inside me. Let them come. This prey was done running. When we returned to the Montana hideout, the silence hit harder than the cold. The steel door was torn from its hinges and lay half buried in snow. Strange boot prints circled the entrance in tight, deliberate loops. Every alarm panel inside had been disabled, not smashed, not forced, but shut down from the inside with expert precision. No gunfire, no signs of chaos, just the chilling absence left behind when a trained unit sweeps through without hesitation. Triad Nova had found us. Jordan crouched in the snow and lifted a bent scrap of metal from near the doorway. A broken piece of the infrared camera that should have alerted us long before they came. He said they'd been here less than 2 hours ago, fast, surgical, leaving behind exactly what they wanted us to notice, a warning disguised as evidence. Inside, the control room hummed faintly, but the main server displayed a single, overwritten video. A man stood with his back turned, voice low, steady, far too familiar. Hearing it pulled something sharp through my chest. He said I should have understood sooner, and that the moment had finally arrived. My former SEAL commander. I felt Jordan's eyes on me as he asked if I recognized the voice. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth settled between us like falling ash. The only person with clearance to steal my algorithm had stepped fully into the open, leading the very organization hunting me. Jordan's voice softened when he said this wasn't organizational anymore. It was personal. I clenched my hands until my nails bit into my palms. I told him I'd finish what he started. We reviewed the signal data I'd taken from the Canadian relay. 4 nodes pulsed across the western grid: Denver, Salt Lake, Billings, Spokane. Spokane glowed brightest, the command hub, the brain of their entire system. To end this, I had to breach it. Jordan argued it was suicide. Triad Nova wasn't a gang, they behaved like a rogue intelligence division. I met his stare and reminded him the algorithm was mine, and so was the responsibility. He didn't agree aloud, but the resolve in his silence matched mine. As we packed to leave, the motion sensors caught 2 drones closing in from the east. They'd located us. No more retreat. No more waiting. I activated the jammer and told Jordan Spokane was our only path forward. The twist tightened deep inside me. Triad Nova wasn't after my code. They were eliminating the last living witness to what my commander had begun 8 years ago. We left before dawn, weaving through icy mountain roads that rattled beneath the tires. Neither of us spoke. The air between us wasn't fear. It was the quiet of 2 people walking willingly into danger. About an hour from Spokane, I synced the laptop to a temporary satellite node. A red pulse swept across the map, Triad Nova's active scan. Jordan saw it and muttered that they already knew we were coming. Good, I told him. Let them wait. We reached the Western Industrial District by dusk, snow falling in soft sheets. And the building housing their control center was unmarked. Dark. Ordinary at first glance. But underneath the silence pulsed the faint thrum of massive servers. I pressed my ear to the metal door. No voices. No movement. Just the electric heartbeat of a system running hot. Jordan cracked the lock. The door opened a few inches before a flashbang detonated at our feet. I hit the concrete as Jordan dragged me behind a pillar. When my hearing sharpened again, 3 mercenaries were advancing in a tight diamond formation, the configuration used when a target must be taken alive. They knew our exact entry point. Jordan whispered that only a federal informant could have given them that timing. I blocked their comms with my jammer and pushed deeper into the building through the fog of smoke. The control room waited in the sublevel. Door open like an invitation. Blue light washed across the walls. Monitors displayed the national grid. The main console read Nova Control. But what froze my breath was the open file Cassia T, my stolen algorithm modified, expanded, rewritten by the same hand that once trained mine. My former commander. I shoved the drive into the port. Jordan guarded the door while I launched the countersink. Screens flickered into a cold blue haze. The system buckled. A voice poured from the speakers steady. Commanding, poisoned by ambition. He said I didn't understand what I was destroying. Maybe I did. I hit the final key. Darkness swallowed the room as their network collapsed. Then the rear door burst open. A federal agent stepped inside someone I recognized. Someone working for them now. He raised his gun and said he was ordered to take me alive. I moved before he finished speaking, letting the dark rush forward to meet us. The moment the embedded federal agent leveled his gun at my forehead, the room snapped into a single, razor-sharp point. His grip was steady, his eyes flat and cold, the kind of detached focus trained into someone who follows orders without hesitation. I lunged sideways, kicking the console hard. His shot tore through the screen, spraying glass that glittered in the dim blue light. Jordan fired back, forcing him to stumble. I closed the distance, twisted his wrist until bone cracked beneath my fingers, then drove a kick into his knee, sending him collapsing onto the metal floor. Jordan cinched his hands behind him, but the man still managed a broken laugh. He said I hadn't won, said someone was coming, said he wanted to take me himself. I didn't need a name. I already knew who was walking toward us. The alarm wailed a long, feral howl, and Jordan's eyes shot to the security feed. He's inside. My heartbeat didn't spike. It settled into that old, lethal rhythm I thought I'd buried. I stepped into the dark hallway, cold air sliding down my spine. At the far end, the door opened. He stepped through older, harder, eyes still sharp enough to cut. My former commander, the man who once shaped me, pushed me, praised me. Now he looked at me like a malfunctioning asset he'd come to retrieve. He spoke calmly, as if none of the bloodshed mattered, as if I'd betrayed him, not the other way around. I raised my gun. He smirked, told me I lacked the one thing needed to win trust. I pulled the trigger. The round slammed into his armor, driving him back before he vanished into smoke. The bunker shuddered. He'd triggered self-destruct. Jordan yelled for me to run, but I wasn't done. I jammed the final dive into the console, launched the countersink, and sprinted out as the servers erupted behind us. We burst into the snow just as the hideout exploded, flames swallowing the structure whole. I didn't know if he survived, but I knew his empire was burning, and I was still alive to watch it fall. After the blast in Spokane, Jordan and he disappeared for 3 days, hiding in a patch of dense forest in northern Idaho. We kept a low fire, filtered our water through snow, and used an encrypted uplink to transmit every piece of evidence to the Department of Justice and the FCC. They responded quicker than I expected, proof they'd been watching Triad Nova closely, waiting for the final link that tied the entire operation to the man behind it. I had been that missing link. By nightfall, internal channels buzzed with news: a senior federal security advisor in custody, multiple illegal relay stations seized, Triad Nova's financial network frozen. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. Jordan studied me across the fire. He said I knew they'd never acknowledge my part in it. I told him acknowledgement was never the point. Then he said my former commander had been arrested in Portland while trying to flee by sea. The words landed without satisfaction, without closure, only an empty weight in my chest. The man who once pushed me forward now waited in a cell under charges of treason. Sometimes the truth hurts deeper than any wound. When Jordan asked what I wanted now, I watched the fire swallow a final branch and told him the only thing that felt true: I wanted a life no shadow could reach. I moved into a small cabin outside Jackson, Wyoming. A narrow stream ran beside the porch, its steady murmur blending with the whisper of wind through the pines. It sounded like a lullaby, soft, cautious, honest. I hung my framed SEAL uniform on the wall, not to honor victories, but to remind myself that I had survived something far harsher than war betrayal. Mornings here were cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs, yet peaceful in a way that finally let me breathe. I walked the old trail behind the cabin, sunlight slipping through the trees like thin ribbons of warmth. Triad Nova was gone. My former commander would never hold power again. His network lay in ruins. But I knew something deeper: people willing to betray a country for control don't vanish forever. All I could do was stay ready. That night, staring at the blue-black sky, I whispered a promise to myself: if anyone ever puts a gun to my head again, I'll show them why no one threatens a Navy SEAL. Then I closed the door and let the darkness settle like a beginning, not an end.